the charisma, the personality, the person, the tenacity, the work ethic. Those are parts, in my opinion, that you either have or you don't have. I've worked in London property for over 2 decades. I'm Grant James Bates. Welcome to London Property Tours. Grant James Bates, Grant J. Bates. I'm Grant James Bates. Welcome. I've lived in London my whole life, and it is without a doubt the best city in the world. You know, we sold 52 properties in Q4 and 36 of them went over their asking price. Those are in neighbourhoods that aren't affected, and there are neighbourhoods that aren't affected at the moment. Across my career, I've built a strong personal brand, the UK's #1 agent, a superstar agent by the Financial Times. I started at 17, renting rooms in house shares, sold the most expensive UK residential property at £61.3 million. I'm the hardest worker in the room. You can't teach seeing like your mum and dad not be able to afford things. You can't teach what hunger that instills in you to like want to deliver and want to provide a better life for your family. If we're talking primarily about prime central London, I think it's the first time in a long time there's value there. And I think it's the first time in a long time that it does feel like, spoken like a true estate agent with optimism and hope, it feels like people are active.
So do you think success is more mindset or skill?
Genuinely.
So ladies and gents, welcome to another episode with Pierre Luxe. And today we have a special guest that doesn't need an introduction in the UK real estate space, but I'm going to introduce him anyway. Some call him the coolest super agent and the most followed agent in Europe, and his social media presence has made him close record-breaking sales in this capital. And the owner of Grant J. Bates Properties. Guys, let me introduce, straight from the UK, Mr. Grant J. Bates.
What an intro, bro.
How are you, bro?
Yeah, thank you very much for that intro.
And do you know what? I've always wanted to hear you say it.
Yeah.
Mr. Grant J. Bates.
Yeah, I slipped the... Do you know what? People ask why the J went in there. It's branding, actually, why that J went in there, just to differentiate a little bit. Although, in hindsight, probably didn't need it. Like, Grant Bates is such a...
Yeah, I like
rare name.
I've always liked the Grant J. Bates, and it's the way you say it. Because I came across you first of all just from property intros, actually from YouTube.
Yeah.
Rather than
really?
short form.
Interesting.
Yeah,
Cool.
from long form. And whenever I go on Instagram, you probably pop up at least once a day. So you're obviously doing something right.
Yeah.
If I was to follow you,
yeah,
for 1 week, what do you think people would be surprised most about you?
I would like to say probably vulnerability and hopefully a lack of ego, because I think before people meet me, blended with the connotations of our industry, perhaps historic connotations, I think sometimes there could be, particularly if they haven't watched my stories, there could be an assumption that I've got a big ego and I'm maybe not the nicest person. I mean, maybe not. Maybe I'm being too hard on myself. But I think what I try and do with social media and what I try and do with Instagram is show a side of real estate and a side of me that is more personable. And I don't really hold anything back from social media, especially on my stories. I'm quite honest with who I am.
It's that authentic touch that you've been true to your character and probably got you where you are now, right?
Yeah, I hope so. Like I made that decision when I started to build traction in property and in real estate. And when I looked across at some of the competitors that had maybe been in the industry a lot longer, maybe at that time had a stronger name or worked for a stronger brand. And I just thought to myself, you know, why am I trying to compete in an arena that I'm maybe not made to compete in or arguably don't have the skill set to compete in to some degree? I think you've got to be honest with your limitations sometimes. And what I realized about real estate and all of sales is, I mean, it's a cliche, but people are employing people that they like. I genuinely think it's that simple. And I think it's tiring if you try and replicate someone else or you try and wear a mask. I think, like you say, people buy into authenticity. So I've always tried to just be how I am now, how I'm at work, how I'm at home. I'm the same person. And I feel like that's the best way to do business.
Good. Let's unpack it. We want to know from a kid to the man you are now, if you can summarize that, what did that journey look like?
I actually just did this on Instagram yesterday. It was a crazy journey. Like I started out in Greenford, if you know where Greenford is.
UB5-ish, just off Norfolk. Is it UB?
Yeah, UB6.
Yeah,
I used to say
UB6.
West London, but it's not a West London postcode.
It's like Ealing Borough.
Yeah, if I was single and I was out trying to, West London, but it was definitely UB6. Yeah. And I grew up in a place called Greenford. I went to Norfolk High School. I wasn't, people have probably heard this on podcasts with me before. I wasn't the best behaved in school.
Yeah.
I was excluded a lot. I was expelled from primary school. It wasn't a conventional route.
Do you think that was your environment? Do you think that was...
Well, do you know what? I actually, like a lot of people, got diagnosed with ADHD as an adult.
Okay.
Severe ADHD. Like they score you out of 9 in 4 categories. I was like 3 9s and an 8. But obviously as a kid, I didn't know that. And there wasn't that education for teachers or anyone at that time. No one really understood what ADHD was. So I was labeled as hyperactive and disruptive and badly behaved. And I was constantly on school report. And I actually wasn't, I was a relatively bright kid. I did okay in my exams and stuff. I just couldn't really concentrate. I was always shouting out. I was always getting into fights. It was always an issue. Like the amount of times my parents got called to the school. I could tell you stories about my dad and mum and how happy they were at that time, but they always supported me. Mm-hmm. And look, I think that definitely forms a base of my character. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't my parents were lovely, absolutely showered me with love. And I'm very grateful for that because I know not everyone has that growing up. But we didn't have much, right? And I think what that did is it instilled an incredible work ethic in me. Mm-hmm. And when I decided that I wasn't going to continue with university or any sort of...
what, uni?
No, I decided not to go, yeah. The longest story is I got accepted to Southampton to do law. Okay. And then about a week before I was meant to go, I said, no, not for me. And you can imagine my dad wasn't best pleased. But he had a similar upbringing to me, and he started as a caretaker and ended up as head of housing. He was a debt collector before all of this as well. So he had a similar sort of story to me. So he supported the work ethic. And I discovered property, and I started renting rooms in house shares in Greenford, Sudbury and Wembley. I was limited to that for 6 months. So really had to put the graft in there. Then I moved to lettings. Yeah, it was just, I think I found my calling. Yeah. I was good with people. As long as they could see past the shaved head and the Nike earring and the zooped up Vauxhall Corsa at the time, which was maybe to taste. I was good. I was good at it. I was good with people. I always worked hard, and I always say that work ethic is the determining factor across, I think, every industry.
Who inspired you at that point? Before you got into...
Probably my dad, genuinely. Like I've touched on it, but, my dad genuinely started as a caretaker for Islington Council. He was a caretaker and he was a private debt collector. And he moved all the way from that to head of housing, director of housing at Islington Council. And the one thing he always instilled in me was work ethic. Even to the point of taking my first job in agency. He took me out and got me one of those, if anyone remembers, those suits from Next that came in a pack where it was all ready for you, all color coded. Took me out and bought me one of those, helped me write my CV. And then I just went out and dropped the CV, got the job in Sudbury, Wembley, started renting rooms in house shares, moved to lettings, moved to sales. Then I moved to the Square Mile and worked there selling lofts and warehouses for about 6 years. Then I moved.
How old was you at this point?
I was 21, I reckon, 22 by the time I got there. I started at 17 and got there. Yeah, got there 21, 22. Then I moved to a major corporate that shall not be named. I was there for a very long time, big part of my career, 13 years. Started as a negotiator in Islington, was promoted 14 times while I was there.
Okay. But how did how did you just move to the corporate? How did it work?
I pestered the head of sales like you wouldn't believe. Yeah, I remember I don't even know if WhatsApp was a thing then. I was probably texting her every other day until she finally agreed to.
And was this prime central London?
This was Islington, so North London. And I'd actually been passed over for a job at this company twice before with two other people that I interviewed with. They didn't think I was the right fit. I was still a bit rough around the edges, right? Yeah. I accept that. But pestered until I got invited in, took a job at in a great office, but potentially at one of the lower levels. I was a negotiator. And did incredibly well. I sold a lot of property, put the figures on the board as you do at a corporate. and then gradually moved up. I ended up leading that office to near £6 million year, highest value
And
office
what
in
year,
the
what
UK.
point in your career, at what age were you at this point?
Oh, I must have been, I want to say 26, 27.
Were you still
something
living
like that.
in Norfolk, or was you
I
Greenford?
was still
Okay.
in Greenford at that point. And then around the similar sort of time, I moved in with my then girlfriend, now wife, in West Hampstead.
Okay.
You know West
Yeah, yeah,
Hampstead?
yeah. So that's a big move.
Yeah, well, I was basically, I'd only lived at home. I mean, I did have a little sort of studio flat set up at home, separate entrance. That was always good after a night out. I was getting up to what I was getting up to.
But even just location,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Change of environment.
Oh,
that's
yeah,
gonna
it
be
was for
completely-
sure. Yeah, it was a big change. I mean, I'd been working in the Square Mile, and our head office for that company, which was Green & Co at the time, was West Hampstead. So I sort of knew the area. But yeah, coming from Greenford, Sudbury, Wembley, and going into any part of town felt strange. Like I didn't believe properties could be worth that amount of money.
right, yeah.
I remember when people were saying, "Why don't you work in town? You're good at what you do." Sounds strange saying it out loud now, but I didn't believe that it was simple as moving to an area where the properties were worth more, and therefore you'd earn more commission.
money, yeah.
It just didn't compute. And maybe there was a bit of self-limitation there, thinking, but I always knew I always hoped and believed I was destined for bigger things than staying around. So many of my mates did, staying around that location and living and growing up there and spending your entire life in a tiny town. And thank God I felt the fear and did it anyway and went in, because then I achieved some great success.
Did you ever find yourself during that period detaching from your circle of friends?
Yeah, I did actually.
Yeah.
Like there was one particular group of friends that I spent pretty much every day with, which was on the Rectory Park estate
Norfolk.
in Norfolk. I was there for a lot of my childhood.
Which is kind of Greenford, but Norfolk.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, and I don't mind saying I was smoking a lot, and and just I wasn't necessarily, didn't necessarily have my head in the game,
Yeah.
And as I started to step up and level up, I do think it's important that you have to take yourself out of those environments. I've seen it said on so many podcasts, but you tend to be as successful as your immediate group, and that's not anything against this particular group and my friends that might watch this podcast now. I'm not talking about you. But and all those friends from school I'm still very close to. But certainly, I think if you want to pursue success in business that's maybe in a different space to where your immediate crowd are, you have to take that leap, and that is a bit scary at the time, because you're
Especially
you're
at that age, right?
Yeah, you're so used to a certain environment, so then to take yourself out of that, it's quite daunting, and to step into rooms with people that are a lot more, whether it's senior than you or experienced than you, or maybe a different background. I think what clicked for me, my sliding doors moment, I guess, was when I realized that I didn't need to be a certain way, as we touched on earlier. I didn't need to be a certain way to do business. What people would buy into was me and my work ethic. And I think, whether you want to label it a rags to riches story or whatever, I think a lot of people relate to that. And I think it immediately gives you a certain amount of respect. And it was when I stopped caring what other people thought of me. I was like, look, this is me, and if you like me, that's it. And if you don't, when you're young, ego, whatever, you taper that maybe as you get a bit older. But I think it was the moment I started realizing that I was the reason people wanted to work with me, and that authenticity came across, and therefore built trust and built relationships. That's the only way you do it. You can't wear a mask. You cannot do it. I've seen people try and do it. It must be so draining. So
it was hard work getting you through these doors at this point.
Yeah, for sure. Like that's all you have, right? Before you don't have experience. When you don't have experience, you don't have it, so you can't blag it. All you can do is show up. And I say to young people all the time at the start of their career when they ask for advice, just manage the metrics that you can, which is work ethic, presenting yourself well, being polite and courteous. And by the way, being polite and courteous, that does not mean how your tone or how you speak. It's nothing to do with that. Like if you'd listened to how I speak when I was younger, you'd have thought I was a different person, like genuinely, because of where I was from. You speak like the environment that you're in. people don't care about that. They care about you as a person and how you can present yourself. Yes, there needs to be a certain amount of articulation. You need to be able to have certain conversations, but certainly the accent isn't a limitation. And I mentioned that because I remember being so conscious at the time that was
of how you speak.
I remember being so conscious, and like how I speak now, I would say, obviously, I wouldn't say it's better. I would say it's more socially acceptable and it's different. But that wasn't a learned behavior per se. That just happened as you put yourself in these environments and you get older and you speak to different people. So yeah.
And tell us about that big break that could have happened any time in your career where you thought, okay, I'm doing things.
Yeah, probably the big moment for me, I think, was, so there was sort of two. There were when I started to gain traction on social media. Because what I realized when I saying earlier that I couldn't compete with people.
When you say social media at this stage, what platforms are you talking?
Okay. Instagram. And the whole reason Instagram started was because I looked at some of the people in competitive agencies that were doing better than me, my competition in the immediate area and I realized that, look, they've got connections. I don't have those connections, whether it's because of where I'm from or where I've worked, whatever. I didn't have the same connections, right? I couldn't just lean on someone I knew or be referred to someone because I was new to that area and I wasn't from that area and whatever else. So I knew I had to create my own terms. I had to create my own platform and I had to get more eyes on me and the brand. So the way I did that was social media.
Would you grant Jay Bates then, or was you just grant?
It's always been the same, yeah. Or maybe it started out as something like most people do, like, I don't know, Grant Bates property something or other. And then when I realized actually that's crazy, you've got to brand it.
Yeah.
It's a personal brand. It's got to be your name. I changed. So I'd say that was probably when I passed sort of 10,000 followers, when I really started noticing traction. Because back then you could only do certain things with 10,000 followers. And then probably my big one was when I was leading the Islington team at this firm and the Northeast team at this firm. I had a huge year where I think I said earlier when we were talking, we banked, I know it sounds slightly crass, but just to put it into context, just under £6 million in 1 year, which was the highest in the UK that year, like ahead of all the big firms in Belgravia and everything. And one particular house, I think, was what turned it. And that was a house called East Villa, which I sold in Hackney at just over £9 million.
Was this when Hackney was going through that gentrification, or was it at the time when it was at the start? Was it?
Yeah, I think
I was actually born in Hackney.
Yeah, I'd say perception. So to you, it would have been 100% gentrified. If you grew up there when you were born, you would say it's already gentrified, probably. Because I only started experiencing Hackney from 2008, 2009.
That's what you knew.
Yeah. So to me, it felt more, I mean, gentrified is a slightly dirty word, but more gentrified when I sold this house. But I guess it's subjective. But I think a big sort of flag that it definitely has been gentrified is when you sell a house at £9 million plus,
especially
right?
then.
Yeah. And I am very conscious that not everyone likes the word gentrification. So, I have to be slightly careful with that. But yeah, when this house traded, it got a lot of press, mainly because I think connotations of Hackney aren't what it was in reality. Like the connotations of Hackney were, I remember that my dad telling me that whole stretch from Shoreditch. Is it Kingsland Road? What road is it?
Not Mare Street.
No, I think it's Kingsland Road from Shoreditch all the way up to Hackney. Effectively, it was known as Murder Mile because there were more murders per capita on that stretch than anywhere else, which is insane to think about when you think about Hackney now. So yeah, that was the big moment for me because it was a shock value, I think, and it picked up a lot of press. There were also a lot of rumours flying around about the person that bought it.
Can you go into that or no?
I can, because I can't confirm or deny if it was this person, but there were lots of rumours that were going around that Drake bought it, the rapper. And then I sold another house on the same road and there were lots of rumours that Chris Brown bought it. And whether or not that was true, it created a lot of buzz and it created a lot of hype. And that probably is what launched my social media into, real notoriety. And that's when I started being offered lots of different opportunities, whether it's press or interviews or whatever it might be, and of course listings as well.
And did you ever think at that stage, maybe I should set up my own business?
Oh yeah, I've always thought that.
Okay.
But I also feel like I had a moment where I realized there was more that I could do and there was more that I could build before I did that.
As a brand or?
As an individual, as a brand, I still had more to learn at that time, in my opinion. And I think we're all guilty sometimes, and it's not a bad thing, it's aspirational, but I think we're all guilty sometimes of, you get to 18, you think you know everything. You get to 25, you think you know everything. You get to 30, you think you know everything. And I think for me anyway, as I started approaching my 30s, early 30s, was when I realized actually I don't know everything, and I'm probably not going to know anything at any age. You're always going to be learning. So the timing was crucial. And, I'd had great success in North and East, but that was the only spot I'd worked really, like North and East and City and Sudbury and Wembley. It wasn't relevant anymore. So I think I needed exposure to more markets before I did that.
Personality over formality.
Yeah.
That's your signature.
Yeah, correct. Yeah.
Tell us about why those choice of words for your business.
Because because that is how I built my career. I always found it strange when corporates would tell you to pitch or to, go after business in a certain way, which was usually, suit and tie, go in with your stupid pack with your comps and stuff, and you'd sit down, you do this really like polished presentation. And I'd always thought that was such a bizarre way of trying to win business, because you're in this person's home, they need to like you.
They need to trust you.
They need to trust you. They need to like you. And I've always said that formality, look, there's a place for formality, right? But I've always thought in a business context that personality is a safe space. I've always thought, formality is a safe space. I've always thought that people are formal when they're not entirely confident to be themselves. And formality isn't going to differentiate you from anyone else. If you're meeting 5 agents and they're all being taught to pitch in exactly the same way, how do you differentiate? And where I was in my career at that time, I was doing well, but there was one particular firm that were ahead of me. So if I was going to keep going in and doing pitches the way I'd been told to do pitches for so many years, I wasn't going to dethrone them, because we're both pitching in the same way and they've got more market share and they've sold more. So why would anyone choose me? And it just felt alien to me. Like I wanted to go in and be myself and get on with the person, because it's crucial for both of you that you have a mutual understanding and relationship, and that you like each other. And personality is the way you do that. I think it takes confidence to be. I think it takes a lot of confidence to be yourself in whatever room you're in, and that's why I do it.
And was there a point in your career where you thought, you know what, I'm going to go for it?
Yeah, I think when I got the head role at this particular office and with this particular firm, and this other competing firm was so far ahead of us, that's when I guess I saw that as a real challenge.
And you was managing the private office, right?
No, this was Islington.
Okay, this is Islington.
Yeah, this was Islington. Private office came later, and that was amazing. There's lots of great things happen there. But I think it's always clicked to me, for me to some degree. But I think when I moved into that particular role was when I realized that I could potentially be really good at this.
So what would you say are 3 differences from being a self-employed agent to a corporate?
3 differences. I mean, quantifiable and logistical ones, I would say, you're not restricted by postcode is the most obvious one. I still think I could talk about how backwards I think the UK generic model is forever. But you're not restricted by postcode, you're led by client, right? That's probably the first thing, meaning if you do a really good job for a client in one location and they've got a family member or a friend or their own property elsewhere, in a corporate model, you're taught to pass that over to someone they've never met, never dealt with, who sometimes you don't even know the skill set of, which now that I'm out, it is, even when I was in it, to be fair, I've always found absolutely mind-blowing. You know, like I don't necessarily believe buyers are exclusive. I don't necessarily believe that immediate local knowledge is the differentiator as to whether you sell or not. I think how you sell is universal, and that core skill set applies wherever you are. So I've always thought that to be a bit of a backwards mentality. So that's probably the first one. The second one is the freedom and the autonomy, and the trust that you should get from a brokerage. And I was a bit of an exception to the rule at a corporate. I was given a bit more room because they saw that I wasn't going to react well to being pigeonholed or like overly managed, and I was doing well. So, you know, let him continue and let him do that. But I think for most people, the breath of fresh air when they move to a brokerage is the autonomy and the flexibility and the ability to run your own life. When I left, actually, a moment for me of realization there was I was sat at home, and I think me and my wife booked a holiday somewhere or something. And I remember thinking, how crazy is it that if you work in a corporate and you're a grown man or woman, you're 39, 40 years old, you've got kids, you've got a mortgage, you're a big boy, that you have to email someone and ask for permission to go on holiday. It just sort of dawned on me about how crazy that concept is. Like, it's your life, you know, you should be able to do what you want. Yeah. So I think the autonomy is probably the second one. And I would say that the third one, sort of linked to autonomy, is probably the like freedom of expression that you're afforded. Yeah. Like, you are able to be the actual agent you want to be. And I've seen that with so many people that were in corporates and they move to a broker model, they're like a different person, like a different agent.
Well, they get to show their personality.
Oh my God,
more,
yeah.
Right?
Like, suddenly their face looks happier, it looks brighter, like they're, and suddenly, you know, even people that respectfully maybe weren't big hitters at their corporates,
but when they go
leave and they fly, like, because they've been bottled up for so long, or convinced that they have to do things a certain way, or indoctrinated to do things a certain way.
Do you think you need a certain personality to go down the self-employed model?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah? Definitely. I think you need an entrepreneurial mindset for sure. And I think you need to be confident. You need to back yourself, or, you know, maybe it's not even confidence. Maybe it's bravery. Maybe it's, you know, I always quote Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway. Old book, but a great book by Susan Jeffers. And I think just looking at that fear and realizing that fear is an emotion that will last a couple of minutes, and making a decision based on emotion that lasts a couple of minutes that could dictate your whole life is crazy to me. I've done so many things, especially in the last few years, that I have been terrified to do. Like, I was guest speaker at Coots. I didn't sleep for about 3 days before that. I was terrified. Even walking up to the stage, I was terrified, but I just made myself do it. And I think anyone that goes into a broker role has that ability to just say, do you know what, whatever. Like,
you have to get comfortable being uncomfortable.
Yeah,
it
exactly.
seems like this was the year that you said, you know what, I'm going to make myself uncomfortable.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, there's a little bit more to it internally, but yeah, I think this was, I'd always back myself, but there's a difference between backing yourself with the security of a salary and backing yourself when you've got 3 kids and a wife.
In one of the most challenging markets.
Yeah, in a challenging market. A wife that's a princess. I love her to bits, but she needs a certain way of life. You know, it's a lot of pressure.
Yeah.
But oh God, man! Like, if anyone watching this is wondering if they should do it, it's just a no-brainer. Once you're out the other side, there's no looking back.
So tell us about the business. It's been just under a year, right?
Just under a year,
How many people? How many brokers fall under? J Bates Property?
We're up to 19 people in total.
So you scaled quite quickly.
11 of those are brokers. We have scaled quickly, and I don't want this to come across as arrogant at all, but we could be bigger if we wanted to be now. You know, there are people that are asking to join. Plenty of people asking to join. We haven't even really done any outreach. I haven't gone out and
what
said.
What do you look for, Grant, in a broker? Now you're a business owner rather than I'm assuming you're still brokering yourself. Maybe you're not.
I'm still doing bits and pieces. I mean, gone are the first 3 months where I'm doing everything and I'm running around doing the viewings and everything. It's predominantly the client side now that I'm doing and managing the team. And what I look for, like, I think that the elements of the job that you can teach, i.e., what you have to do to put together a sale, what you have to do to progress a sale, that it's not difficult. It's not rocket science. Like, that part you can teach, right? So what I really look for is the personality and the person. And a lot of it I judge, like, even on interviews, I'm rarely asking competency questions. And can you call it even an interview? Most of the time I'll go for a workout with them or I'll go for a walk. It's just about getting a vibe from them. Because I think the best salespeople don't really sell. Like, what I mean by that is they do, of course you package it up, of course you present, of course you make sure you're selling, maybe contradicting myself, selling the elements of the house or the property that are attractive. But I think it's more about how you make someone feel. And so I judge someone on how they make me feel, because I know that's how they're going to make a client feel or a buyer feel. And do they have that core set, that work ethic, that drive, that humility, that hunger? That's what I look for primarily, because I believe those are the parts you can't teach. I genuinely believe that with sales, you either have it or you don't. I don't think you can teach it. That's my personal opinion, because I think if you're teaching it, it comes across contrived and forced, and then that doesn't build any sort of relationship.
I think you can train it to get better.
I think you can train it to get better. And of course, maybe I'm being facetious. Like, I don't even know if facetious is the right word I was trying to show off. I feel like you can train it to a degree, in that, am I a better salesperson now than I was when I was 18? Yeah, of course. But what I more mean, I guess, is the parts that you can't teach, the charisma, the personality, the person, the tenacity, the work ethic. Those are parts, in my opinion, that you either have or you don't have. And if you don't have them, you might be able to plug a few gaps with your skill set or your learned sales ability, but you won't ever be, the best of the best. And you see it with footballers, right? You see it, and it's the whole old adage from Michael Jordan, like, hard work beats talent, and it's so true. And if they don't have that, they don't have that desire. If they don't have that. If they don't make me feel a certain way, if they don't feel excited, then it's not going to work.
So do you think success is more mindset or skill?
I think it's all mindset. I think there's an element of skill. Of course there is. You have to be able to do what you've said you're going to do. You have to be able to deliver. But politely, it not even politely, because I'm an agent, I don't think you need a great skill set to be an agent. That's why if you delve into, like, the background of a lot of agents, there are some exceptions to the rule, but I think most estate agents actually, I can't swear, I was going to swear, you had difficult, the upbringings or difficult relationships with schools, or certain even trauma. They genuinely, for me, feel like they are some of the best agents, because I'm not entirely convinced that you can teach that sort of hunger, or it's harder, it's rarer. Look, I'm not saying I definitely don't have a chip on my shoulder. I let go of ego a long time ago. I'm not saying you can't be from a fantastic background and be a brilliant agent. Of course you can, but I just think there's elements of that background that you can't teach. You can't teach seeing, like, your mum and dad not be able to afford things. You can't teach what hunger that instills in you to, like, want to deliver and want to provide a better life for your family. Like, it's very difficult.
It's similar to when you expose someone to a certain lifestyle, they can't go back. When you've exposed someone to a less of lifestyle, and that continues to be the catalyst for them to achieve success, there's no going back.
Yeah.
What does a normal day look like for you now compared to when you was a broker in the corporate?
Genuinely, actually, my day isn't too different.
Okay.
Because I was afforded a certain amount of autonomy there, but I'm also very aware that's the exception to the rule. But my typical day is I'm up usually at 5-ish, sometimes a bit earlier, sometimes a shade later, but for me, I really believe in win the morning, win the day. Like that's something I've always followed. And I also need it for my mental health to get up, get myself moving. So for me, it's usually wake up at 5. It's some form of gym or exercise, which I think is crucially important, particularly if you have ADHD. It's an absolute game changer.
A week?
5 or 6. You can't tell yet, but summer body's coming, bro.
Okay, no.
I'm telling you.
Weights,
cardio. Do you know? At the moment, I'm trying to trim. At the moment, so I'm doing a lot of boxing and a lot of Barry's boot camp.
The cameraman, he's into boxing as well.
Oh, is he? He looks a bit too big for me, to be fair. So yeah, I boxed when I was a kid, and then I rediscovered it again when I was like 30. So I'm big into it. So I'm trying to trim at the moment. But yeah, and then maybe I'll go back to weights. I mean, I want to be like an Adonis by the summer. I'm going, too much information here, but I'm going to the World Cup.
Nice.
And my mate, who may watch this podcast, is coming with me, and I'm going to compliment him now, which I rarely do. Is in incredible shape.
Okay.
And I'm not looking to match that.
Yeah.
I just don't want to be like the fat guy next to him. I want to have at least some.
Want to be proud.
I want to at least be able to hold my own. Yeah. So that's me. But then so mornings workout, and then I'll usually sweep up email, sweep up a bit of social media, anything that's came in overnight. And then it's usually some form of team meeting, and then every day's different after that. It could be viewings, MAs, pitches, whatever you want to term them. And then it's home, and it's working again at the moment anyway, quite late into the evening. Because as soon as I've done anything in person, I look back at my WhatsApps and my emails, and it's all built up again. But I love it, so it's all good.
What habit has had the greatest return on success?
For me, it genuinely is the early mornings and the working out. Yeah, as much as I don't want to repeat myself, that is 100% for me. And I'm not linking that, by the way, to any sort of work ethic, because
so that's a 5 a.m. wake up for you?
5 a.m. yeah. But it's important to say it doesn't work for everyone, right? There's morning larks and night owls. I think that's a Daniel Priestley book. I'm sure it is. And what they basically talk about is the fact that it's a misconception that early mornings mean that you're more hardworking. Some people's it's literally how your brains are wired. Some people's brains work better later in the day than in the morning. I work better in the morning. So
even having kids, right? It's going to be completely different.
Well, if you want to get any sort of time to yourself, like anyone that's got kids will know, if you've got kids and you're running a business, I mean, the only time you can really carve out for yourself is if you get up early. So for me, it's the mornings always that is the differentiator.
Is there anything that you hate about a estate agency in the UK?
Yeah, I hate the connotations, and I hate the reputation.
Especially when you go to the US, Australia, other parts of Europe.
I hate the reputation that it has, like I remember when I first got into agency, and I used to be a bit embarrassed to say I was an estate agent. If people asked, I'd always say I'm in property. I used to hate saying I'm an estate agent, because as soon as you say you're an estate agent, you're like somewhere between like traffic wardens and politicians. Like people instantly think you're going to be a certain way. So I would love, and I'm trying slowly to break that stigma. And I think the emergence of brokerages and the dwindling of high street and corporate, I think will have a big impact there. I think if you fast forward 5-10 years, the cream will rise, and hopefully that will mean the reputation changes.
So I've heard you say it before. London is the greatest city in the world.
Yeah.
Do you still believe that in 2026?
Yeah, I do. Yeah, I really do. But I'm biased, because actually I was about to say English. I'm actually 30% French. I found out via a DNA thing the other week, which means that my grandparents weren't entirely truthful. At least one of them. That's interesting. But like I'm just London born and bred. Like I was born in Shepherd's Bush. I support QPR. All my family are here. Yeah, nice. All my family are here. I love everything about it, and I think the press get hold of, the press are the press. They get hold of information, and they escalate it. Like you saw it when all the phone snatching and everything was happening. Yeah. And then when you actually looked at the the stats, like crime was actually down, but the perception of the public was that crime was rife. And I just think, London is maybe getting a bit of a bad rep at the moment, but I see it swings like fashion. I think, I think before we know it, it will be back in vogue again. And
When it comes to brokering, do you think London attracts the best skilled brokers?
Difficult for me to say that because I haven't worked anywhere else.
Okay.
And there's also, I know of some incredible brokers in other locations. So, a good friend of mine, Charlie Moxham, is out in Dubai at the moment, just did, I think, the biggest deal on record in the Middle East or something, I was reading. And he is exceptional, and he's in Dubai. So
I've seen his stuff.
I think one thing that getting older has taught me, and subjectively being successful has taught me, is, I remember my granddad saying this to me, actually. He was like, there's always going to be someone bigger and better, always. So I think there's talent in London for sure, but I think there's talent everywhere in the prime and super prime arenas of those countries. There are really talented people everywhere.
Yeah, there's talent, and then there's, I guess, high performers.
Yeah.
With you now setting up a business, attracting brokers, what does a high performer in our industry look like for you?
A high performer for me, and I'm not, condoning this either way. People work how they want to work. I do accept that you need to have a work-life balance and everything else. But I think you got to pick your poison, personally. And what I mean by that is I think if you want to be a high performer, like it or lump it, you've got to be on pretty much the entire time. Which is why you've got to love what you do. If you don't love what you do, you're not going to want to respond to WhatsApps at 10, 11 o'clock at night or take calls at 7 in the morning because people are in different countries. And I'm sure there'll be some people listening thinking, oh, well, work-life balance and I want to have my time. And that's fine. That's their choice. But for me, if you want to be a high performer, you need to put the time in. You need to put the work in. And that means, working more than perhaps you should. And I'm a big advocate for mental health. I do think you need to step away sometimes. I'm guilty of not doing it enough. You absolutely do need to have your days, your mental health days, I think they're called now. But if you want to be a high performer, you've got to be on.
You think you just have, you have to, for me, my opinion, somehow blend it into your day-to-day life.
Yeah, you have to love it.
If you're at the top end.
Yeah.
Maybe if you're not, then...
But if you love it, it is, right? Because for me, I've got my own business. I work disgusting hours, especially at the moment. I did when I was at a corporate, but I worked disgusting hours now, but I love it. And I think you've got to love it. If you don't love it, you're not going to be willing to... If you're occasionally, of course, you're going to have your days where you're like, oh, God, can't be arsed, whatever. That's fine. That's human. That's normal. But I think in any industry, any job, if you're going in and you're really having to G yourself up to do something, you're either in the wrong industry or you're in the wrong firm, because you're not going to be successful if that's your mindset. You're not going to be a high performer if that's your mindset.
Is that ever been based on also numbers in terms of what you're achieving? Can you be a high performer but not put numbers on the wall?
I think the harsh answer is no, probably not. I mean, you can be a high performer and not earn as much as someone. Of course you can, because it depends what market you're in. You might be a volume agent rather than a, and I'd still consider myself a volume agent rather than a value agent, actually. So, but I think proof's in the pudding. If you're not putting the numbers on the board, then you can have spells. Of course you can. Everyone does that. You have spells of doing better than other times, but no, the figures need to be there.
What do you think people don't understand about London that aren't from London?
I think it's got to be safety again. I think they don't understand how safe it is. Like, yeah, of course there's crime, but there's crime in every city. And of course, watches get robbed. If you want to walk down the road with a 25 grand watch on your wrist, and we're in a cosmopolitan and diverse city where there are going to be people that are poorer than you, I'm not condoning it. I'm not saying it's right, but stuff like that's going to happen. And I get it. People say you shouldn't have to think like that. And I agree to an extent, but I doubt it's any different in any other major
Do you think it's
city.
how we market the city?
It's the press, of course. It's the press. The UK press are outrageous. nothing sells better than negativity. Sadly, maybe you see that more with the tabloids than you do with what's the other one, broadsheets. Maybe you see that more with the tabloids than any other paper, but yeah, negativity sells. You see it all the time. I said about this on my Instagram story the other day, like Brits in general, and I don't want to make like assumptions. Of course, they're all not all like this, but can be incredibly negative. Like so negative. Like don't enjoy other people's success, or they don't enjoy it when things are going well. There has to be a grey cloud somewhere, and I just think that's such a sad mindset to be in.
It's been generational.
Yeah.
It's that example. If you were to go down to New York and drive with the top down in a Ferrari, most people will probably applaud you and ask you how you got it.
Yeah.
If you do it, we're in Oxford Street. If you went down Oxford Street with the top down in a Ferrari, I'm sure there's someone who's going to say,
yeah, of course.
Who does he think he is? Or who does she think she is?
Yeah, but that's projection, isn't it? Like, I've had enough therapy over the years to know, like, you basically have therapy to deal with people that don't have therapy. And usually any sort of resentment or jealousy, that's a projection. It's a safeguard. It's like, it's like you coming in with like a nice watch or whatever and having something that I don't have. The easy thing for me to do is protect my own ego and be like, he's probably stolen it, or he doesn't deserve that. Well, that's the easy thing for me to do to make myself feel better. Whereas the harder thing to do, but once you do it, becomes a lot easier. Harder meaning you've been indoctrinated to think that's the right way to behave. Is to be like, oh man, love it, sick watch, like where'd you get it? Yeah, whatever. That's how we should be. Yeah. But I think it's easier for people that are subjectively successful to be like that with each other than it is for others, because people that don't have as much as you want to blame someone else. It's this victim mentality, isn't it, which just doesn't get you anywhere.
I just want to spin back to your experience as a broker. If you could highlight one moment where a big deal went wrong and what you learned from it and how it changed you, and if you still have those experiences now where you tend to fumble on any deals.
100%, of course you do. Like, I always say you have to have the failures to enjoy the success, and you learn something a lot of the time. If you're brave enough to look at the feedback, you learn something every time. Okay, look, my conversion rate where I was before and even now is great, but there's no way you go into every single. You might think you're the best person in the world for the job. You might think you're the nicest person in the world. Everyone loves you, but not every pot is right for every lid.
Not
right?
everyone's aligned, are they?
Yeah, you're going to have situations where it doesn't work for whatever reason. I can tell you one that I had really recently, actually. It was a property in Hackney that I'd effectively been instructed on verbally, all confirmed. I set up a group with the clients and my team, and all the team jumped in, like, oh, great to be working with you, blah, blah, blah. The vendor had a massive wobble and called me and was like, this is a lot, this is too much. And basically instructed another firm who then sold it to a buyer that I was going to show like the next week. Yeah. And obviously you feel sick. Oh God. And by the way, if you don't feel sick to your stomach when something like that happens, you're in the wrong industry. I felt sick, but... so
you still have that competitive nature?
Of course. Yeah, you've got to keep that. But I remember at the time when this happened, this was only a couple of months ago, I remember thinking, my initial thought was, oh, the vendor's high maintenance, ridiculous. But once I sat and actually reflected on it, it was probably a lot. It was probably too fast. I probably should have dealt with it personally first, then added the wider team slowly and just, taken a bit more care rather than, I can see how it would be, especially if you're home, and I can see how it might have come across as too much, even though the context and the words were polite and lovely. If your WhatsApp pinged 20 times in the space of 5 minutes, it could be overwhelming. So I can sort of see it from her side.
And where do you see the UK heading in the next 3 to 5 years? Do you think it's a positive future? Do you think there's huge opportunities there? We're still in a buyer's market. Yeah. Rates are slightly going up due to the Iran conflict.
Look, there's a lot of speculation right now, isn't there? And I'd say there's a lot of hope and hope feels horrible to say, actually, given the reason people would potentially be leaving the Middle East. But there's definitely a feeling that we might see a return to London from a lot of the people that have moved to the Middle East. I don't think that's necessarily going to happen, personally. I think, just the same as London has its issues, other countries have their issues. And, as soon as time passes, it's less of an issue, right? Time is a healer, as they say. I don't think it's necessarily going to be a big shift. But what I do think is, in parts of London at the moment, there is incredible value. And caveat here being, every neighborhood operates completely differently. We sold 52 properties in Q4 and 36 of them went over their asking price. So that's not, those are in neighborhoods that aren't affected, and there are neighborhoods that aren't affected at the moment. But if we're talking primarily about prime central London, I think it's the first time in a long time there's value there. And I think it's the first time in a long time that it does feel like, spoken like a true estate agent with optimism and hope, it feels like people are active, slowly active again.
And where do you want to position yourself at that stage in the next 3 years as a business? Do you plan to scale up even more?
Oh yeah.
What does the next 3 to 5 years
Well,
look for you guys?
first of all, I want, despite us being a broker model, I want the guys I've got to bed in and be happy.
Yeah.
Because I think if you expand too quickly, you can one rotten apple can end up ruining everything.
It's quite a tight team.
Yeah, exactly. You want to make sure your core people, particularly because a lot of my people now are friends of mine that I've known, I've worked with. I've deliberately done that. I've kept it, because I think if your first core is tight, then everything else will. It's harder for one person come in to upset that, because if one person comes in and you've got 11 people or 19 people that are focused on the goal, then that person's the exception, right? Not your team. So I'm being really careful in the first 12 months. Or 24 months, I guess it will be by the end of next year. And then I'm going big. Yeah, then I'm going big.
Well, look, we wish you all the best.
Yeah.
We just have a few fiery questions that we want to fire over to you. So
let's do it.
First question I've got, favorite place you travel to?
I would say the Cotswolds.
Nice.
Yeah, yes. I love a
cottage, spa.
Yeah, I love a UK break. Yeah, there's various places we stay. We go to Soho Farmhouse a lot. I just love the English countryside.
Okay.
Yeah.
Time travel to the past or the future?
Oh. Future.
Yeah?
Yeah, I think.
So you're happy with the past? You've moved on? You wouldn't change anything?
You've got to have that mindset.
You do,
There's
right?
a million different things I would change in the past, but I'd be really intrigued to see what the world's going to be like for my kids. I think I'd have to be future.
Texting or talking?
In person, talking.
Okay.
Phone call, I'm probably guilty of moving to WhatsApp quite a lot.
Business, texting or talking?
Talking's always better.
Okay.
But when you're manic, I think you default to WhatsApp because it's just quicker.
Favorite film?
Oh, Man on Fire.
Denzel.
Unreal. Okay. Basically anything that Denzel Washington's been in, but Man on Fire is... Equalizer's another great one, but Man on Fire is probably the ultimate.
Night in or night out?
In.
Okay.
1,000,000%.
So you'd rather a takeaway than going out for a restaurant?
Yeah, all the time.
Favorite food?
Oh, it's probably American, I know that's soap, like a good burger, wings, chips. Yeah, that's...
Southern?
I mean, I know a burger is German, FYI, and that chips are French, but American style, yeah.
And how would you define yourself in 3 words?
Aware, humble, and hardworking.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
Well, guys, we've come to the end of the pod. If we want to get in touch with you, Grant, best social media platforms to get in touch with you?
Probably Instagram still, at Grant J. Bates. Or you can email hello@grantjbates.com.
And what can we look forward to for the future?
Oh, big things.
Yeah?
Yeah, there's some things I can't talk about, but it's going to be good. Please God, it's going to be good.
Cool. Well, we wish you the best and thank you for coming down.
Thank you, bro.
And
yeah, man. Appreciate it, bro.
Cheers.
Take care. Thank you.